What if I told you that the most powerful R&B anthem of the civil rights era was written the same night its creator was turned away from a motel because of the color of his skin, and that the most selling female single of all time was never meant to be a love song at all? Welcome to R&B Hives, where tonight we are going 10 deep into the verified, documented, undeniable real stories behind the greatest R&B records ever made, and I promise you, half of these stories are going to shake everything you thought you knew. Because these weren't just songs, they were survival, heartbreak, protest, genius, and sometimes all four in the same 3 minutes. And by the time we get to number one, you are going to understand why some music doesn't just top charts. It changes the entire direction of human history. Number 10, Sam Cooke, A Change Is Gonna Come, 1964. Here's a fact that will stop you cold. In October 1963, Sam Cooke, one of the biggest recording artists in America, arrived at a Holiday Inn in Shreveport, Louisiana with his wife and his band. They had a reservation. The hotel turned them away at the door because they were black. And Sam Cooke, a man who had just had 29 top 40 hits, was arrested that night for disturbing the peace for simply demanding his room. He drove away from that motel in silence, and inside that silence, something cracked open in him. He had been careful until then. His audience was largely white. His label, RCA, wanted nothing political, and Sam had played the game, keeping his protest quiet while the civil rights movement roared around him. But that night in Louisiana changed him. He had also heard Bob Dylan's Blowin' in the Wind a few months earlier, and it shamed him. A young white folk singer was saying what Sam was afraid to say. So he went home and he wrote A Change Is Gonna Come. One of his own musicians heard the demo and told Sam it felt like death. The song scared people. Sam himself performed it live only once on a TV show, and that recording has since vanished from history. His record label sat on it. RCA didn't release it as a single until after Sam was shot and killed at a Los Angeles motel in December 1964. He was 33 years old. The song that became the anthem of the civil rights movement. The song that played at Barack Obama's victory celebration in 2008, the song added to the Library of Congress National Recording Registry. Sam Cooke never got to see any of it, but every note of that track carries the weight of that parking lot in Shreveport, and don't you ever forget it. Number 9, Gladys Knight and the Pips. Neither one of us wants to be the first to say goodbye, 1973.
Well, we just can't fake it.
Here is something that should make you angry on Gladys Knight's behalf. For years at Motown Records, she and the Pips were treated like second-string acts. She said it herself on Biography on A&E. Diana Ross and the Supremes, the Temptations, Marvin Gaye, they got the hits. Gladys Knight got the leftovers. And she took those leftovers and turned them into gold over and over again. In 1972, Gladys and the Pips were done with Motown. Their contract was expiring and negotiations had broken down. The label knew they were leaving. And in what can only be called poetic justice, their final Motown single, the song they recorded as their farewell kiss-off to a label that never fully respected them, became their biggest Motown hit of all time. Neither One of Us Wants to Be the First to Say Goodbye hit number 1 on R&B chart for 4 consecutive weeks and peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. The only reason it didn't hit number 1 on the Hot 100 was Vicki Lawrence's The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, blocking it. The song had been written by a country songwriter named Jim Weatherly, a former Ole Miss quarterback turned singer-songwriter, and Gladys made it, Bleed. Then on March 10, 1974, at the Grammy Awards, Gladys Knight and the Pips did something no act had done before. They swept 2 Grammy categories in the same night. Best R&B Vocal Performance for Midnight Trina, Georgia, and Best Pop Vocal Performance for Neither One of Us. 2 Grammys, one night. And they did it for the label that had spent a decade treating them like an afterthought. Sometimes the best revenge is being undeniable. Number 8, the Jackson 5, I'll Be There, 1970. Before Michael Jackson was the king of pop, before Thriller, before any of that, there was a 12-year-old boy from Gary, Indiana, who recorded a song in June of 1970 that shattered Motown's entire record book. The Jackson 5 had already gone #1 with I Want You Back, ABC, and The Love You Save. 3 smashes in a row, and then something different happened. Berry Gordy had gotten a song from songwriter Bob West, but he didn't like it. It was called I'll Be There. He liked the title, but the song itself wasn't right. So at midnight, literally midnight, he called a songwriter named Willie Hutch and said, "Fix this by 8 a.m. Hutch stayed up all night, rewrote the song from scratch, and handed it to Gordy at dawn. Gordy loved it. And hours later, they were in the studio with an 11-year-old on lead vocals. But here's what makes this story even more remarkable. The entire industry expected the Jackson 5 to keep delivering upbeat, funky teenage bops. I'll Be There was a ballad, a tender, emotional, stripped-down ballad. Nobody saw it coming. It went to #1 and stayed there for 5 consecutive weeks. It sold 2 million copies in the United States, which at that moment made it the biggest selling single in Motown's entire history, knocking Marvin Gaye's I Heard It Through the Grapevine off the top of the all-time Motown list. It was also the last #1 single the Jackson 5 ever had. From that point on, no Jackson 5 single ever climbed higher than #2. That November 1970 week was the peak. A 12-year-old carried it there. In 2011, the Recording Academy inducted I'll Be There into the Grammy Hall of Fame. 40 years later, still undeniable. #7, Bill Withers, Lean on Me, 1972. Bill Withers didn't walk into a studio young. He didn't get discovered as a teenager. He spent his 20s in the United States Navy, then moved to Los Angeles at 29 and worked the factory floor at an aircraft parts plant, assembling toilets for Boeing 777s by day. By 32, he had released his debut album. By 33, he had written one of the most important songs in American music history, and he wrote it on a piano he barely knew how to play. Lean on Me. Lean on Me started the day Withers bought a used Wurlitzer piano with money from his first album. He had no formal training. He sat down, started hitting chords, and the phrase "lean on me" appeared in his mind. He later said he grew up in Slab Fork, West Virginia, a coal mining town, where people genuinely looked out for each other across class and race lines. He had moved to the concrete sprawl of Los Angeles and found himself missing something he couldn't name. And when he found it, it was community. Simple, unconditional community. So he wrote it down. We all have pain. Lean on Me hit #1 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and the R&B chart in July 1972. It stayed at the top of the pop chart for 3 weeks. Billboard ranked it the 7th biggest song of 1972. It won a Grammy for Best R&B Song in 1987, 15 years after it came out, when Club Nouveau covered it and sent it back to #1. That makes it one of only 9 songs in history to reach #1 on the Hot 100 performed by 2 different artists. In 2007, Bill Withers' original recording was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. He passed away in March 2020 at 81. But that Wurlitzer melody, the one he played with untrained hands, will outlive all of us. If you are enjoying this, do well to like, share, and subscribe to keep connected. #6, Al Green, Let's Stay Together, 1971.
Make me feel so brand new.
One afternoon at Royal Recording Studios in Memphis in 1971, Al Green walked in and found his producer Willie Mitchell and his drummer Al Jackson Jr. just messing around, playing a groove with no purpose, no plan, just noodling. Green stopped, he listened, he left the room for 15 minutes. When he came back, he had the lyrics to Let's Stay Together written on a piece of paper. 15 minutes, one of the greatest soul songs ever recorded, born in the time it takes to boil an egg.
It's what I want us to do.
But getting it recorded was its own battle. Willie Mitchell wanted Green to sing it almost in a whisper, soft, understated, like a man confiding something sacred. Green wanted to lean into his full voice, powerful and commanding. Mitchell kept pushing him softer and softer during those 8 days of vocal sessions, and Green eventually gave in out of sheer frustration. That accidental softness, that silky, intimate restraint is the reason the song works the way it does. Sometimes a producer arguing with his artist creates magic neither one of them could have found alone.
Times are good or bad.
Let's Stay Together reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. and held the top spot on the R&B chart for 9 weeks, making it the #1 R&B song of the entire year 1972. Rolling Stone ranked it the 60th greatest song of all time. The Library of Congress added it to the National Recording Registry in 2010 as culturally and historically significant. In 1999, it was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Al Green was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1995. And that 15-minute burst of inspiration in Memphis, it has now been generating royalties for over 50 years. Number 5, Roberta Flack, Killing Me Softly with His Song, 1973. Here is a story about a song that started as a poem scribbled on a napkin by a 20-year-old woman at a concert in Los Angeles in 1971 and ended up winning the Grammy for Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance simultaneously. And the woman who wrote those napkin notes never received a single cent in publishing royalties.
Singing my life with his words.
In November 1971, singer Lori Lieberman was coaxed by a friend into seeing Don McLean perform at the Troubadour Club in L.A. McLean had just released American Pie, but it was a different song, a haunting ballad called Empty Chairs, that wrecked her. She later said it felt like he was reading from her private diary on stage. She pulled out a napkin and started writing. Those notes became Killing Me Softly with His Song, eventually finished with collaborators Norman Gimbel and Charles Fox. Lieberman released her own version in 1972. It never charted. Then Roberta Flack was on an airplane. She heard Lieberman's version on the in-flight audio. She said the title hit her first. She grabbed a notepad, replayed the song 10 times, and transcribed the melody by hand at 30,000 feet. She walked into the studio and made it her own, and the recording she made in 1973 became one of the most iconic vocal performances in soul music history. It spent 5 non-consecutive weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, more weeks at the top than any other record that year. Flack swept 3 Grammys in one night, and in 1996, when the Fugees covered it with Lauryn Hill on the mic, an entirely new generation discovered it all over again. 1 napkin, 3 eras of greatness. Number 4, Stevie Wonder, Superstition, 1970. Number 3, The Temptations, My Girl, 1964. Smokey Robinson has said it clearly and on the record. If it wasn't for The Temptations, he never would have written My Girl. He didn't hold the song back from a competitor. He deliberately, intentionally wrote it for them, specifically for a background singer named David Ruffin who hadn't yet sung lead on anything. Smokey saw Ruffin perform at the 20 Grand nightclub in Detroit, turned to those around him and said, "I have a song for that voice."
Long as I can feel the breath.
Berry Gordy had told Smokey when the Temptations first signed with Motown, "Get me some hits on these boys." Smokey had been studying Ruffin's voice, capable of extraordinary tenderness, but with an undertow of gravel and raw power that most sweet-voiced lead singers couldn't access. So he sat down at a piano at the Apollo Theater in New York during a package tour with the Miracles, and with his bandmate Ronald White, worked out My Girl right there backstage. When the Temptations heard it, they grabbed it immediately. The rhythm track was cut at Hitsville, USA, on September 25, 1964. The Temptations added their vocal overdubs on November 10, 1964. It was released December 21st.
Just to hear you say you'd forgive me, but
Before My Girl, the Temptations had placed only 1 record in the U.S. Top 20. After My Girl, they placed 23 more. It was their first #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, the first #1 pop single Motown had ever scored with a male vocal group, and was later certified 7X Platinum. Otis Redding covered it, the Rolling Stones covered it, Al Green covered it. It was selected for preservation in the Library of Congress National Recording Registry in 2017 as culturally and historically significant, and Smokey Robinson still calls it his international anthem, even though he gave it away. Number 2, Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, 1971. Berry Gordy called it the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. Those were his actual words, documented on the record when Marvin Gaye played him What's Going On in 1970. He refused to release it. He shelved it. And Marvin Gaye, who had been the most bankable solo male artist in Motown history, told Berry Gordy, "Fine, then I'm not recording anything else until you release my song." He went on strike. He stopped working entirely, and Gordy eventually blinked.
What's going on? What's going on?
The idea for the song came from Four Tops member O.B. Benson. In 1969, Benson was in San Francisco and witnessed police violently attacking anti-war protesters during the People's Park demonstrations in Berkeley. He was shaken by what he saw and wrote a protest song with Motown composer Al Cleveland. The Four Tops didn't want it. They weren't interested in protest music. So Benson brought it to Marvin. And Marvin, who was already broken, his duet partner Tammy Terrell had just died from a brain tumor. His marriage was crumbling. His brother Frankie had come back from Vietnam with stories that made him weep. Marvin added his own lyrics and completely inhabited the song. Benson later said, "We measured him for the suit and he tailored the hell out of it." The recording session itself produced an accident that became iconic. Engineer Kenneth Sands was asked to compare two of Marvin's vocal takes. Instead, he accidentally mixed them together. When Marvin heard the layered double lead result, he kept it. What's Going On was released on January 21st, 1971. It sold over 200,000 copies in the first week. It topped the R&B chart for 5 weeks. It went to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. Rolling Stone later named it the greatest song ever made. Not the greatest R&B song, the greatest song, period. Number 1, Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You, 1992.
I'll think of you.
This is the most selling single ever recorded by a female artist in history. And Dolly Parton wrote it as a professional breakup note, not a love song. In 1973, Dolly was trapped. She had spent 7 years on The Porter Wagoner Show, a country TV program hosted by the man who had given her her first real platform. Porter Wagoner was her mentor. She owed him everything, but she was ready to be a solo artist and he wouldn't let her go. She went home and asked herself, what do you do best? Write songs. So she sat down and wrote I Will Always Love You, the same day she wrote Jolene. It was her way of saying to Porter Wagoner, I love you, I respect you, I appreciate everything, but I'm leaving. Then Elvis Presley heard it. Elvis wanted to record it. Dolly was so excited she nearly said yes on the spot. Then Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, stepped in and said Elvis would only record the song if Dolly surrendered 50% of her publishing rights. Something in her gut said no. She cried all night. She said this publicly, but she said no, and she kept her song. Dolly's version hit number 1 in 1974 and again in 1982. Then in 1992, it was her co-star Kevin Costner who suggested the song to Whitney Houston for the Bodyguard soundtrack, playing her Linda Ronstadt's version to introduce it. Dolly Parton heard Whitney's finished version for the first time while driving her car and nearly wrecked it. Whitney's recording spent 14 consecutive weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, the longest run by any single to that date. It sold over 22 million copies worldwide. It remains the best-selling single ever by a female artist in recorded history. Dolly Parton said later, when Elvis's manager tried to take her publishing, she cried all night. But when Whitney sang it, she was glad she held on. Dolly held her copyright. Whitney became a legend, and that song, written as a farewell in a living room in Tennessee, became the defining ballad of an entire generation. Some songs are bigger than the moment they're born in. This one was born for eternity.